There's something about Fight Club that makes it stick. Not the twist, not the violence, not even Tyler Durden himself. It's that it feels familiar, like it's speaking to something you felt but couldn't name. A quiet desperation that doesn't scream. It just lingers. Tyler says, "It's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything." But the real story isn't about freedom. It's about identity, the kind you didn't choose, the kind built for you by advertising, trauma, expectation, and survival. The narrator of Fight Club isn't a person. He's a role, a corporate drone, a consumer, a nice guy. He follows the rules, plays the part, keeps everything in order. But underneath that polished surface, something is decaying. Carl Jung spent his life mapping the very thing this movie dramatizes. What happens when you repress the unconscious, when your persona becomes too perfect and the shadow decides it's time to take the stage. This isn't a story about madness. It's about awakening, but not the kind sold in books, the kind that tears your life apart first. The narrator has no name. That's not just a script choice, it's a mirror. He could be anyone. That's the point. He wears the uniform of modern masculinity, bland professionalism. He flies to meetings, fills out reports, scrolls through IKEA catalogs. His apartment is perfect. His wardrobe is curated. His life is structured to avoid any kind of emotional weight. Everything he owns defines him, because there's nothing inside to do the job. Carl Jung called this state over-identification with the persona. The persona is the mask we wear to function in the world. It helps us navigate society, do our jobs, hold conversations. It's useful, but when you wear the mask for too long, you forget it's not your face. That's where the narrator is. He's become the mask. He's not even pretending anymore. He's disappeared. And he doesn't realize it because the world rewards him for playing his part. He's efficient, polite, non-threatening, dead inside. The hollowness isn't dramatic. It's quiet. That's what makes it so real. He doesn't scream. He just fades. And the psyche isn't built to tolerate that kind of emptiness forever. It holds for a while, then it cracks. He stops sleeping. That's the first sign. Insomnia isn't just fatigue in this world, it's spiritual erosion. He's no longer resting because his unconscious is no longer quiet. Jung believed dreams were a dialogue with the unconscious. They help the psyche process emotion, trauma, and unmet needs. But when dreams are blocked, when the unconscious is silenced, something in you rebels. The narrator doesn't know what's happening, so he does what any rational man would do. He tries to function through it, but his body won't let him. His emotions won't let him. Everything becomes surreal, distant. As he says, everything's a copy of a copy of a copy. Eventually, he finds relief in the strangest of places, support groups for people with terminal illnesses. He doesn't belong there, but in a way, he does. Because those rooms are the only places where the masks come off, where people cry without shame, where death is in the room, and so no one has time to lie. He breaks down in those rooms. And that breakdown feels like honesty. But this isn't therapy. It's a glitch. He's found a temporary release, not a solution. He's still avoiding the core problem. There's no authentic self underneath the persona. There's just silence. And silence, if ignored long enough, becomes something else entirely. When Tyler shows up, it doesn't feel like a twist. It feels inevitable. He's not introduced with horror. He's welcomed with relief. Tyler is everything the narrator isn't. Unapologetic, sexual, confident, chaotic. He doesn't ask permission. He acts. He destroys. He speaks with the clarity of someone who knows exactly what they want, even if that thing is destruction itself. But Tyler isn't real, not in the literal sense. He's not a man. He's a psychic event. He's the return of the repressed. The narrator has spent his life denying parts of himself he believed were dangerous, weak, or inappropriate. Rage, desire, dominance, freedom, all of it pushed into the dark, where it took on a life of its own. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile in order to be accepted. The mistake is thinking those parts go away. They don't. They wait, and when they finally break through, they don't ask for a conversation. They take control. Tyler doesn't arrive to help. He arrives to dominate, to correct the imbalance, and for a while, that feels like healing. The narrator stops performing. He stops pretending. He lets himself be raw, and it's intoxicating. But Tyler's freedom is built on erasure. He doesn't want to be integrated. He wants to consume. And the narrator, still starved for identity, lets him. It starts with freedom, fighting in basements, bloody noses, broken teeth. Pain becomes a kind of sacrament, a ritual. It strips away the persona. There's no room for performance in a fight, just presence. Fight Club offers what the modern world doesn't: intensity, brotherhood, a place to feel alive without needing to explain yourself. And that's why it grows. But it doesn't stay simple. What began as catharsis mutates into dogma. Tyler's rules replace society's rules. His vision becomes gospel. And the men who follow him aren't healing, they're disappearing. Jung warned that the shadow, when unintegrated, becomes not a helper, but a tyrant. When it's not met consciously, it takes over unconsciously. It doesn't ask you to become whole. It demands that you abandon who you are. Tyler doesn't just challenge the narrator. He absorbs him. He speaks through him, acts through him, builds an army in his name. And the narrator, for a time, lets it happen, because he believes Tyler is making him strong. But strength without self-awareness isn't power, it's possession. The transformation from Fight Club to Project Mayhem marks a crucial turn, not just in the story, but in the psyche. What began as a release has now calcified into control. Tyler's voice, once playful and liberating, becomes directive. Men are no longer fighting each other to feel something. They're being stripped of identity entirely. No names, no questions, just rules. This is no longer about healing or rebelling, it's about obedience. And the scariest part? They're not being forced, they're volunteering. Because for men who've been hollowed out by modern life, Tyler's chaos offers something more seductive than comfort: certainty. Jung would see this as a collapse of ego boundaries. The individual's psyche has been overwhelmed by an archetype, an ancient psychological blueprint that lives in all of us. In this case, the shadow has fully taken over, not just for the narrator, but for everyone around him. It's what Jung called archetypal possession. You're no longer making choices. You're being moved by something deeper, older, and far more powerful than reason. And it doesn't care about nuance. It speaks in extremes. It doesn't build, it purges. Project Mayhem isn't a revolution. It's a funeral procession for individuality. The narrator begins to sense it, faintly. Something's wrong. He can't remember doing things he's clearly done. People greet him as Tyler. They speak to him with reverence and fear. And the more he searches for answers, the more it becomes clear. He's not in control. He never was. This isn't just narrative tension. It's a psychological unraveling. The man who thought Tyler was his escape now realizes he's Tyler's hostage. Amidst the rising tide of violence and control, one person remains out of sync with the rest of this descent. Marla. She doesn't obey Tyler's rules. She doesn't buy into the philosophy. She just exists, in her pain, in her mess, in her unfiltered, inconvenient reality. And that's why she matters. Marla is everything Tyler isn't. She's vulnerability. She's the capacity to feel. She's uncomfortable to be around because she reflects a truth the narrator has tried to suppress, that pain isn't always something to be conquered. Sometimes it just wants to be seen. In Jungian terms, Marla represents the Anima, the inner feminine, the bridge between the conscious self and the emotional unconscious. The narrator doesn't understand her, and at first, he resents her. She's chaotic, irrational, needy. But slowly, in moments he doesn't even register as growth, he starts to care. Not in the way Tyler would, possessively, casually, cruelly, but in a way that costs him. He starts protecting her, lying for her, calling her when he's scared. And that's the shift, because the road to integration doesn't run through dominance. It runs through compassion, through connection, through the willingness to feel pain that isn't your own. Marla forces the narrator back into his body. She disrupts the myth that masculinity is about control. She reminds him that feeling something deeply and surviving it is its own form of strength. And in doing so, she cracks Tyler's illusion just enough for the narrator to finally ask the right question. What am I becoming? Everything starts to dissolve. The narrator tries to put distance between himself and Tyler, but that distance is fake. They're not two people. They never were. He was never watching Tyler do things. He was doing them. The realization hit slowly, like an infection, working its way through the body. Conversations he didn't remember having. Plans he didn't remember making. Bombs he didn't remember planting. This isn't some dramatic twist. This is the psyche collapsing under the weight of its own denial. What Jung called the Nigredo, the blackening, the symbolic death of the false self. The stage where the mask disintegrates, and all that's left is raw contradiction. The narrator runs, but there's nowhere to go. He confronts strangers who know him better than he knows himself. He tries to alert the authorities, only to discover that Tyler's fingerprints are everywhere. On buildings, on uniforms, on men who salute when he walks in. This is not just a mental breakdown. It's ego death. For so long, he believed he could control Tyler. But control was never part of the deal. Tyler wasn't a partner. He was the sum total of every abandoned part of the narrator's psyche. weaponized by years of repression. And now, Tyler doesn't want to be a voice in his head. Tyler wants the body. He reaches the final threshold, not by choice, but by exhaustion. There's no clever trick left, no room to run. He's seen Tyler, not as a friend, not even as a threat, but for what he really is, a mirror. Jung believed that true healing didn't come from rejecting the shadow or pretending it's gone. Healing begins the moment you stop being afraid of what lives in you. The moment you stop fighting the unconscious like it's some external enemy and realize it's just the part of you that wasn't allowed to speak. The narrator doesn't kill Tyler out of rage. There's no revenge here. What happens is more radical than that. He accepts what's happening. He names it. He steps into the violence of his own making, and for the first time, takes responsibility for it. The gun isn't suicide. It's confrontation. It's the symbolic death of the fantasy. He turns it inward not to end himself, but to end the illusion, to destroy the part of him that thought destruction could lead to salvation. Jung wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." The goal was never to become Tyler, and it wasn't to destroy him either. It was to see him clearly, to understand where he came from, and to finally choose what kind of man would walk out of that room. The shot rings out, and Tyler falls. Not because he was beaten, but because he was understood. And when it's over, the narrator doesn't celebrate. He doesn't scream victory. He breathes. That's all. A single quiet breath in the wake of everything burning. The buildings come down, not just physically, but symbolically. Every structure Tyler built, every plan, every threat, every system, it all crumbles because it wasn't built on truth. It was built on trauma, on rejection, on the fantasy that you can destroy your way into being whole. Jung understood this moment deeply. The destruction of the false self isn't the end, it's the beginning. This is what he called individuation, not becoming someone new, but becoming someone real, a self that holds opposites, that doesn't need to perform, that doesn't need to dominate, that can live with shadow and light in the same body without being torn apart by it. As the narrator stands with Marla, holding her hand, the world collapses around them, but he's still present. For the first time, he's not dissociating, not pretending. He's just there, feeling the weight of everything he's done and everything he still has to become. This isn't resolution. It's not redemption. It's the beginning of adulthood. Not the kind defined by age or job title, but by honesty, by the ability to face your darkness without letting it dictate your life. He didn't win. He woke up. Fight Club isn't a guide. It's not something you imitate. It's something you confront. It shows you what happens when you refuse to listen to yourself. When you live too long in the persona, deny the shadow, avoid feeling, and then wonder why you're falling apart. Jung never told us to destroy the world to find ourselves. He told us to face what we've hidden, to walk into the dark with both eyes open. Because what you refuse to face will find its way to the surface eventually, and it won't ask for permission. And if this breakdown gave you something to think about, if you felt like someone finally said what you've been carrying quietly for years, stick around. This channel dives deep. No shortcuts, no fluff. Just the kind of truth that actually changes you. Subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. And if you're already here, thanks for being part of this. We're just getting started.